a public video, it also means that any comments that you put in on the Facebook post, it does actually show up in our manager here, which means we'll be able to take all sorts of comments and questions on YouTube, on Periscope, and on Facebook as well. So if you do want to jump in with any questions to our guests, you're more than welcome to do so, because we've got two fantastic people to talk to. First and foremost, this is Talkin Con, cup of tea with an Englishman in San Diego. As always, looking for your support. If you would like to show willing at our Patreon page, patreon.com/EnglishmanSDCC. I know that times are tight, so you don't necessarily have to put super hearts or any kind of support on YouTube in that regard. But if you do, we will gladly take it. We'll gladly accept it. So thank you very much indeed for any of those support.
Was that Caroline I heard that in the background a moment ago?
Yes, she is. She's banging. Caroline is banging in the background. She's sorting out the menus for this week because she has taken the duties of being kind of like the house chef very, very seriously indeed. I think it's mostly because I tried spaghetti bolognese and nearly poisoned the entire household. So it's just it's a more a case of just survival of the fittest here in the building. No, but she's doing a cracking job putting all the menus together. So at this point, she's now planning this week.
Sane.
It's keeping her sane, which I can totally understand. At this point, it is a case of everyone trying to keep their heads in some kind of space.
For sure.
We'll get into all of that, of course. But if you have joined us as well and you are wanting to get into the conversation about the cancellation of San Diego Comic-Con, we are going to cover it a little bit at the back end. But at the end of the day, it's just going to be more a summary of what CCI has told us. It's not a great deal, but we can really get into, because beyond that CCI announcement, there's not a great deal that we can, in terms of details, in terms of how exactly the badges are going to be refunded, how the hotels are going to be refunded as well. By the looks of things from that announcement, is just going to be a case of don't call us, we'll call you, and they'll just kind of get those payments back to people. We will cover that in some regard at the back end of the show, but bear with us as we have ourselves two great guests. If you have just joined us, welcome along. We already have one or two people saying hello. Michael P saying good morning. We've got ourselves Leanne D. Hey there, into the blue mister. Good afternoon all. So Andrew Dickinson. So any news broken this week? Yeah, I think, like I say, we'll get into that, of course. But there we go. Thank you very much indeed for everyone for joining us. Of course, you can get comments in on Facebook, on Twitter, on Twitch, on YouTube. YouTube is a good one as well, because I can keep an eye on all of the past comments and we'll catch up with anything. We did have that conversation, of course, with Mike Armstrong a couple of shows ago. One or two people have been getting their questions in about New York Comic-Con and, of course, Star Wars Celebration in the light of latest developments. We're going to find out exactly what Mike Armstrong has to say about that. We'll go through all of those comments and get them through to him very soon indeed. But it's Sunday. It's one of our bi-weekly shows here on Talkin Con, a cup of tea with an Englishman in San Diego. My name's Leonard Sultana, and here each and every week we talk about everything con culture, Comic-Cons, and all the things and stuff and nonsense that we enjoy at those particular shows. We've got two cracking guests who are joining us today. We have ourselves GIL Cabrera, the former chair of the San Diego Convention Center. And we also have esteemed writer, comics, novels, plays. Basically, if it involves putting one word in front of another, Tony Lee is definitely the person who's joined us in that regard. Hello there.
The other sounds like talking. So.
Putting one word in front of another in a competent and appealing fashion. There you go. You can stick that on the page. You can stick that.
I'm having that as a quote.
You can stick that on a business card. So there we go. It's great to have the pair of you here. We were going to talk to Gil first and then get into Tony, but we've decided we're all good. Well, no, we're all dive in, and of course, if Tony has any questions for Gil as well as we go into.
Gil, have you watched the film Highlander? I just wanted to check. I'm going to be from now on all your guests. That's what I want to know.
Yeah, no.
I have no problem asking that question.
There's a certain standard, for goodness sake.
Can I just say, because this also came off the back of when we had Rachel Smith on, and Tony asked the same question there. She hasn't seen it. I watched it 2 days ago. It happened to be on, and I watched it. So no, Highlander was definitely on.
I'm gonna keep ragging her on this because literally at the London Spring Convention, I pointed out that Christopher Lambert was there. He was my favourite character, and I showed a picture, and she just looked blankly at me, and it was like, "Who is this old man that you're having photos with?" And part of me died when she said this. Even her boyfriend looked at her like, I think we need to break up.
Oh, God.
And she still hasn't seen it. She's locked in a house. She has no excuse. Just pointing that one out. Love you, Rachel.
It's harsh but fair. I could take it. Indeed, our neighbours. Duncan is over Connor. Apparently, no, just kidding. Apparently, he says. But I could see Tony's face instantly just dropping. So just leave that one alone.
There's a lot of people who like Duncan over Connor. That's because Duncan's had more hours of being a Highlander. You see, so you know.
There could be only one though. I mean, come on.
Yeah, for the next film.
And I think we'll agree that with the films as well. There can be only one. Because I watched the end of Highlander and actually thought, should I watch Highlander 2? And automatically my brain tried jumping down my throat.
Watch Highlander 2, the Renegade cut. The Renegade cut is actually quite good. It does explain things in Highlander 2, like how does Connor McLeod suddenly change from a short coat to a long coat halfway through a fight and things like that, because the whole thing was spliced together all over the place.
Well, those are the questions I needed to answer.
Well, exactly.
Right, shall we dive into this?
We're
your talk as quickly as possible there, Len.
We're not going to talk about Highlander the whole time. That's what I prepared for.
I suspect Tony would have no problem with that whatsoever. Right, so we're going to dive into a whole bunch of subjects, obviously, but we'll cover a couple of stuff with Gil first. And I think first is to introduce yourself, because I gave you the title there, former chairperson of the San Diego Convention Center. What exactly did that entail? And basically introduce yourself, please, sir.
Sure. So I'm a proud San Diegan, and by my day job, I'm a lawyer. But I was appointed to the Convention Center Board of Directors in 2013 by the then mayor, Todd Gloria, and then was essentially on that board for the full 6 years that you're allowed to be on the board. So I just rolled off in February, and then for 2 of those years, I was the chair of the board of directors, which, overall responsibilities for the operations of the building and overseeing the amazing management team that is there. It's as we discussed, I think offline a while ago, this would have been my first Comic-Con off the board.
Yeah.
So it would have been a very different experience, obviously, but was still looking forward to it, to at least dropping by. But yeah, that's my background. Basically, for a couple of years there, I was the person kind of in charge of the operations of the building at a policy level.
Because I remember
incredibly bad form that you make sure that the one convention after you leave is the one that gets canned. I mean, that's bad form, man.
Well, I mean, the comment I made to my former fellow board members was like, geez, I leave in February and the entire industry shuts down. I mean, come on.
This is how much you're needed, Gil. This is how much you must return.
I left you with this amazing reserve balance and this and the other thing. And, it's 2 months. That's all it took. No, it's terrible luck, obviously, for this industry, which is just, one of the lifebloods of San Diego. So it's been a marvel to watch. I'm glad they're able to use the center to help the most vulnerable amongst us in San Diego. So they were able to shift that, and that had obvious benefits for the employees of the center as well. So was happy to that. But yeah, very, very, very sad to when you saw it coming and you sort of saw the cancellations as they started stacking up. When you know the budget of that building the way I do, it was just heartbreaking.
Well, it speaks volumes about that, considering that, I mean, I saw the press conference with Kevin Faulkner up on the podium and Rip Ripito as well, talking about that coming together in 10 days to put that all together from an idea in somebody's head to actually open up the doors and get the homeless, like you say, the vulnerable of San Diego actually in the building. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, and I'm glad you recognize that there are folks, you know, there's always the naysayers in town, but there are folks that were, you know, during that 10-day period where some internal folks obviously knew it was coming, and knew that it was being worked on. But you sort of heard people, you know, on the Twitter sphere just kind of like, you know, we've got this big building, why don't we use it? And I'm just like, guys, you know, we're throwing it together right now. Just, you know, patience. And then when they did it in 10 days, it's amazing when you consider the logistics of that. You know, from the building's perspective, the nice thing is that the staff at the convention center, you know, we always like to say that we build and destroy a city every week. And so they, you know, once you told them what they were doing, they were able to sort of, you know, do exactly what they do best, which was put together really an incredible structure in a matter of moments.
Yeah, because I know that certainly when you speak to a number of San Diego Comic-Con fans, there's a number of them, a huge percentage, I guarantee, that just think that the building remains dormant and empty for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
It's just it just exists for us that one week in July.
Don't kill my dreams.
Sorry?
Don't kill my dreams.
Well, a funny conversation I once had with the great and late former president of Comic-Con. We were in the building for another event. It was sort of like a pre-Comic-Con thing, but we were just walking the building. And he goes, it just doesn't look full. And there were like 30,000 people in the building, you know, and we're walking around this other convention and he was just like, you know, it just looks empty. Doesn't it just look empty? I'm like, oh, yes, I get it. Yours is the big one. I understand. But it was really funny. But it's true. I mean, any other convention in that building, you could theoretically at least conceptualize how you would social distance, you know, sure. Comic-Con is not one of them.
Yeah. With the relationship then to put that kind of project together to get the homeless into the building, it's obviously a lot of factors and a lot of plates being spun. But I'd like to talk about the relationship between the convention center and the city, especially when it comes to putting on events like Comic-Con, because that's not just the building; it's the closing down of Howard Drive. It's lots of spaces around the building. It's lots of different elements all coming together. What's the relationship between the convention center and the city? What is the kind of to and fro that kind of has to go ahead for a convention like SDC to happen?
Sure. Well, there's the technical structural relationship, which is that the convention center, so it's only in San Diego would we complicate it this much. The convention center building itself is on Port of San Diego land, and it is owned by the Port of San Diego, which is a separate governmental agency from the city of San Diego. The port then leases the building to the city of San Diego for $1 a year, and then the city created a nonprofit called the San Diego Convention Center Corporation. It is the one member of that nonprofit, and it appoints its board members, so somebody like me, like I was, and then it delegates operational control of the building to the San Diego Convention Center Corporation. And what we're supposed to do is, and we do very well, is run the building, pay for everything with the revenues of the building itself. And so that's how it kind of runs. On a more day-to-day basis, it's as you could imagine, it's an incredibly close relationship. The mayor's team and other city staff, as well as council members and everyone else, is generally pretty well briefed on what's going on. Having on a day-to-day basis, on big events like Comic-Con, you bring in a lot of agencies, including, by the way, the Port and the Coastal Commission, because shutting down Harbor Drive, it takes a multitude of agency approval, and that was one of those things that for our team was an amazing feat. It was literally a year in the making the first time we shut down Harbor Drive, because there were 3 different jurisdictions that had to approve it, had to go through the planning and everything else to make it all happen. And our approach was from a security standpoint, it made more sense. From a safety standpoint, it made more sense. And the thing that triggered it for us was the year before Harbor was shut down. on Sunday when everything ended, everybody was leaving, and as you recall, it used to be you couldn't walk on the front drive, you could walk on the sidewalk, right? And just the way the mechanics of, I guess, the number of people leaving the building happened, there was a crush of people on that sidewalk as they were leaving, and a lot of the folks, our sort of logistics folks took a look at it and says, we have to use the entire front drive, including where the cars go. And that sort of started the conversation. And it's been a great experience, I think. I think it's made it a much mellower experience generally, because you didn't realize how much stress that damn front drive walk caused every attendee in the building. I mean, it was just because you were just like, you were crushed. So I remember you and I talked about it that first year. It just felt like lighter as a general proposition. So
it was the same year as well that all the exclusives moved to online as well. So I remember that Thursday meeting up with you. So it was the Wednesday, the preview night, and we'd kind of gone onto the floor, and we were just kind of like going, okay, the atmosphere is so strange because everything's really open and free out on the front. Everything's kind of, there's no real stress here inside. It was the strangest vibe. I just remember the look on your face, like, this is not a Comic-Con like I experienced. This was so.
We were like, did we open? Did we have the doors open?
Okay, so in that regard, then, I mean, it sounds like a really strong symbiotic relationship between the convention center and the city. Then you throw San Diego Comic-Con into the mix, the CCI organization itself, which I can imagine is a stressful thing in itself because of all of the things that they demand from the building. I mean, has it always been a positive relationship? Is it something that has had its fraught moments? What's been that kind of relationship been like?
They have especially the primary people have been working together. I mean, the event planner that is in charge of Comic-Con at the convention center has been in charge of Comic-Con for I think 30 years. I mean, so the people that work together have worked together forever. And so there's a very, very good cohesive working relationship going there. It's a stressful event, so there's always going to be those tense moments with a push-pull between the logistics of the event and the needs of the building and vice versa. But I mean, I had never seen a group when you're dealing with such a high intensity planning process go better and get along better at the end of the day. They just have really good open lines of communications. They talk to each other constantly. That relationship is much more the convention center and Comic-Con. The city is involved obviously in some of the logistics, but it's really the two primary entities that do a lot of the work, working up the event. And again, the convention center's job is to make sure Comic-Con and every other convention that comes in is as successful as it can be. And so they'll help the promoters of that event do whatever they can to make it great. And then we'll often, occasionally we'll have suggestions on again, all logistical type of things. But it at the end of the day, it's a really good working relationship. It's always been impressive to me the way they've managed it, given again the intensity of it. And the funny thing is, once the convention's going, it's I don't want to say autopilot because that's not the right word, but everything's just kind of running, right? I mean, it is incredible. You have in the 6 years I was there was very few actual incidents at the convention where something had to happen from our perspective or anything like that. It just goes. And then all the staff, right? Even all the staff at the convention, as you know, both security, Comic-Con folks, convention center folks, they've all done this together forever.
Yeah.
So all those people know each other. There's folks that I would see once a year at Comic-Con, and we'd hug, we'd say, hey, how are you? We'd catch up, and then I wouldn't see them again for another year. And these were people working in our building, right? So it was an interesting dynamic.
And also, but it's interesting then that you talk about the way that everything kind of works almost on a automatic level. Everything kind of like slots into place on a very much organic manner. But there have been those moments, and certainly those times certainly when I've been going to Comic-Con, when we have seen those changes which have really added on a different dynamic and a different flavor to the convention, such as the metal detectors that were included for the Hall H, and for the whole RFID requirement for some added security. How has been the changes in tensions that have happened over the course of, say, the last decade or so? How's that affected how the building is operated?
You're saying the broader tension. I mean, security is always one of those things that everybody's going to be concerned about and taking a look at. We are always trying to be proactive about it. It's 135,000 people, and if you count the other 100,000 outside, it's a couple 100,000 people in a very tight area, and so you always want to be mindful of that. But we're like that kind of all the time with every convention. Obviously, there's always that sort of review. But yeah, we've tried. I know the convention center has tried from a building standpoint. I know Comic-Con's always looked at it this way. They always want to be proactive. They don't want to be reactive in terms of threat levels or things like that. They just want to try to bring things in. But it's also one of these events that people are used to things the way they are, and so anytime you implement change, it has to be gradual, because you'll freak people out in terms of the experience they're having if you don't. And so I think Comic-Con's always been very good at least trying to implement change in a way that sort of works. Sometimes it's gone well, sometimes it's gone poorly, as we all know. But I think the metal detectors were introduced pretty well. And did a decent job of it. I mean, I think there were some logistical issues with sort of moving the lines and the chutes through in a timely manner. I thought the RFID thing was one of the more smooth implementations, frankly, when you consider how much could have gone wrong with that, and the way it works. I mean, you always heard the occasional person that their chip wasn't working, but it was a very small number. I mean, if you think about it, and they usually were able to fix it pretty quickly. So that was always that was one of the more impressive implementations, frankly, because I remember when it was coming in, I was like, oh man, I hope this goes well, and it did. So
well, considering they weren't there on the Wednesday, and then they suddenly were there Thursday, Friday. Yeah, we were in the lines moved. What those, and what the hell's going on? It was in, like you say, Mr. Peters was down there. Sorry, Mr. Rogers was down there. Rogers was down there. He was making sure it was all done himself. He was very much hands-on in that regard. I'm going to get some questions in as well from everyone else. I know a lot of people are jumping in with stuff from on the YouTube and on the Facebook. By all means, we are going to cover those, and we're going to get into a couple of audience questions very shortly indeed. And of course, Tony, if you'd like to jump in, we'd always like to take
it's great, because it's nice to hear about this, because San Diego is my convention. I absolutely love San Diego. When I first got into comics, it was the first proper convention I went to back into like 2005. And I'd gone every single year. And then about sort of 4 years ago, I had to stop going because I started doing the Comic Zone for the London Film and Comic Con. And this year was going to be the year that I was going to go back. And then there was a thing last year where San Diego, we'd seen there was a date and it got moved, and it was going to be the same weekend as London Film and Comic Con. So I couldn't go. And I think it's nice of you to cancel it so that obviously I don't feel so bad. But I was listening to what you're saying. So I remember even from 2005, the change between 2005 and say 2015 or 2016 was insane. I mean, I remember talking to somebody at the Sci-Fi Channel at one point, and they were telling me, the fact that it just got crazy inside the convention center itself, and the fact that basically so many people were turning up now without tickets just to hang around in San Diego. And now suddenly, the Sci-Fi Channel was taken over. I think it's Mary Jane's Cookies, which is the cafe on the Hard Rock Hotel. And then the Cartoon Network was taken over a shoe store. And then it turned into people were just walking into stores and going, how much do you make in a week? If we give you double, can we just have your shop? And it just completely changed it. And it turned San Diego into basically the entire city became the Comic Con. And that was incredible. And the one thing I remember was, there's just two things I'm going to remember, and I'm going to say these very quickly. One of them was the fact that the last time I turned up was the first time I ever went down onto the marina section, because you always kind of avoid that kind of area, because you just kind of just come out the front, you go to the gas lamp, you come back to the convention center. I hadn't realized there was
that's where the bars are.
Yeah, but I just didn't realize there's like an entire fun fair section there this year, and I was walking around just going, what the hell is all this? But I will say, for organization, San Diego Comic Con is absolutely amazing, and the reason I say that is because I think it was 2009, I want to say, but it might be 2008. I had a wedding that was being done at San Diego Comic Con that I was officiating. And I had, like, by the laws of the state of California, I can conduct weddings. And there was Ray Dillon and Eva. I can't remember who it was actually. It was Ray Dillon and Renee Deliva. They were getting married, and they had asked me to do it. And it was in that kind of auditorium-y bit that's at the back of the convention center.
Yeah.
And I'd done my signing at IDW. I'd run back to my hotel, which was just off the gas lamp, and I'd got changed into clerical gear. So I had a dog collar and a black suit. I mean, first off, wearing a black suit and a dog collar in the middle of San Diego in July is bloody stupid. Yeah. But I ran back to San Diego, and I got there it was done right after it ended. And I remember coming back about 10, 15 minutes before everything closed. And I was like, hi, I need to come in. And the guy was like, I'm really sorry, but, we're not allowing anybody else in now. It's kind of, we're finishing up. And I said, no, you don't understand. I'm here to do a wedding. And he just looked at me and he went, I thought you were cosplaying, and then whisked me through. And he took me down all the secret corridors that I'd only ever seen, the movie people going down. And it was great. And I've got to say, the speed that it was just like, bam, like dum, 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 straight there. I was stunned. And I must admit, you see this craziness and this hecticness. And the people who go year after year, we all have our little secret nooks that we know if I just duck through here and go down there, and I can find myself in a completely different area that I need to be in. But I was absolutely stunned by the fact that every year it gets bigger and bigger and crazier. Yet your guys they're like, in London, we have cab drivers have to have the knowledge. The road. These guys were doing that, boom, straight away. I was so impressed with that.
Well, Leonard will remember when we gave out chocolates 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
It was really funny because I obviously know a lot of those back corridors, and we met up in an office in the interior of the building to grab the chocolates, and then we were heading to the outside of Hall H. And one of my team members were like, "Oh, well, let's go this way." I was like, "What the hell is this way?" And it was this hallway that led to some stairs, and then all of a sudden we popped out the side right there, and I was like, how do I not know this particular location? And it was hilarious, and it was, but the building is full of those, and it's a, you obviously you have to, right? You have to have the sort of ways where the staff and the teams can get through, and where you're moving all the talent and anybody really. I mean, I always joked when I would give a council member or some state official a tour, I'd be walking them or putting them in the freight elevator, and I was like, Obama was in this freight elevator, and you can sort of tell them about that, that behind the scenes, excitement that all these celebrities get to see the kitchens, the freight elevators, the docks, right, all that stuff that everybody else doesn't get to see. But it is amazing the way people that you can move through the building, and that that was one of those things where when I was thinking about it this year, I wasn't going to be able to move through the building like that, so it's going to be a different experience altogether. So,
well, let's talk about that different experience then, because something what I was going to get into, like you say, the changes that have happened to the convention over the years. We are going to be seeing a totally different San Diego Comic-Con in 2021. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on how you feel the convention could evolve in terms of, because we've seen implementation of, like you say, of security, of health and safety, everything that the building has done and the convention center staff have done to make sure that everyone is safe and well and looked after at the building. But this is going to be in 2021 slightly different, because I think the tone of people coming to the convention center is going to be different, not just necessarily how things are organized, but just the audience are going to be bringing their own baggage. What do you think, how do you feel the building may have to evolve, and how the organization may have to evolve for next year?
It's hard. I know that the initial steps that were taken before everybody understood really how locked down we would be, I was seeing them more publicly, obviously, than the behind the scenes stuff. But they were starting to implement everything they could in terms of the high contact surfaces, that type of stuff, and and increasing the level, even though it's, you know, the amount of cleaning that goes in up and out in that building under normal circumstances a lot, but trying to ramp that up even further. It's hard to imagine though, on with social distancing, how you pull off the very large conventions, right? I mean, again, the ones that are 15, 20, 30,000, you can see how you'd, you know, in the public sessions, how you'd separate people. You know, you do some broader separation in the chairs and things like that. But the lineups, I mean, the way you get into stuff, you have to completely rethink that if the social distancing measures are in full effect. July 21, you know, theoretically you have a vaccine, hopefully sometime next year, but up until then. But I will bet you money you're still going to have a lot more people. My gut is we're going to feel much more like the Asian countries have felt now for a while, where a lot more people mask up as a general proposition, right? I mean, you know, where you just see that as a more common thing everywhere you go. And so I think that the trauma of this event is going to stick with us for some time. I was telling my wife, I was at the grocery store yesterday. We do a once a week run, and what are we at, week 5? I don't even know. Yeah. It's like a blur. And it feels weird to be around people, right? I mean, it's just troubling, you know, and when you think of that mentality and you apply that to Comic-Con, it's just not, you know, it's not cohesive. So I think next year will be a weird year, just because even if we're out of it and we have a vaccine and whatever, you're still going to be so close to the experience that I'll be very interested to see A, how many people go, and B, whether or not they limit the numbers. One thing that'll be interesting, I think, and this is, again, I've got no knowledge on this, so this is just me, a fan spitballing, is depending on how many people get the refund versus get the continuation, right? Do they sell those refunded seats?
Well, that's the comment that's coming from Andrew Dickinson on the chat. I can't see how it's going to work without restricting numbers, so I don't think they will have a resale.
Exactly.
He's saying. That's
and if they do, it won't be until very close to the convention, because you're just not going to know. I mean, you're going to have no idea what you're going to be dealing with until probably a few months out. And so you could see them holding back whatever gets refunded. I'll be fat. I mean, we'll never know, right? We'll never know how many people got refunded. But that would be a very interesting aspect of it as well. If you know, a third, which would surprise me. I just don't think a third. I think most people are still going to want to go.
Yeah, I think San Diego's in a good position in one way, because you've got test conventions beforehand. Because, like, for example, ReedPop in England, we've got next month was supposed to be the MCM Comic Expo. They've now moved that to July. I think that's optimistic. I think that probably will be cancelled and they'll move to their October one. But you'll still have October will be that. You'll have New York Comic Con, if it happens, will do something along those lines. Even if they don't, there'll be restrictions. Or even if they do in a smaller level, you'll have restrictions and things like that coming in that San Diego can watch. And then you've got things like WonderCon and even like Long Beach and things like that are coming in earlier in the year. All of these things, every single one, San Diego's got the ability to look at it, see what went wrong, see what went right, and work at it from that. And I think that does put pretty much anybody who's post June next year, convention-wise, I think is in a very good position to work out how they can make it work.
Yeah, and remember, we do 100 and something other conventions the rest of the year. So it'll, you know, right now it's looking like the summer is probably gone, obviously, but July in San Diego is actually crazy. You know, in July in San Diego, that we have Pride, we've got Comic-Con, there's Esri. There are the number of citywide events in July is insane. I don't think Esri's announced anything, but I
was going to ask about that particular convention.
Yeah, I haven't heard. I mean, at least on the I think the last time I checked the schedule, it was still there. Pride has been canceled. I mean, July in San Diego is going to be a fundamentally different experience this year, because you know, all the big citywide events are basically getting canceled. So, but I think the other interesting one is going to be the auto show which is as close in terms of size to Comic Con as it gets in the building, because it's over 100,000 people that come through the building over the course of the weekend.
Yeah.
That one will be interesting because obviously, you know, you got all these people getting into a car, touching a car, and doing. I mean, there's all the stuff that after, you know, you've experienced this, and if you've ever watched Contagion, you freak out by everything you touch in the world. So that'll be another interesting test case in terms of how they do it. And, you know, by that time of year, you may be able to sort of have limited numbers of people moving through the building at particular times or not. So I agree with you. I mean, I think we'll definitely get some test cases, and then we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I suspect that we're probably not seeing anything this summer.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I'd also like to talk about a little bit of history when it comes to the convention center and how they've wanted to move forward in terms of the long wanted expansion to the building, which has been something that you've been wanting in place for years. It's come so close so many times. Could be now in the aftermath of this crisis, could we see those conversations kind of fading away for the moment? Could we basically see that the demand of people wanting to come to the convention center and do conventions, could that kind of negate any conversation about an expansion now?
So, you know, the obituary of the convention business has been written many times, often because of the, you know, the video conferencing and everything else. My gut on that is this: I don't think organizations, once they can come back to it, will go away from that, for the simple reason that people love the excuse to travel somewhere and experience something different, you know, as part of their professional development, as part of everything else. And so I think the sort of in-person stuff will always be something that we will do as a society. We're going to adjust, but I think it'll be a different experience. So I don't think the convention center business is going away. I certainly don't think in a city like San Diego, which is one of the top 5 convention destinations and tourist destinations in the country, that would really ultimately affect them. It'll be a short-term hit for sure until we adjust. In terms of the vote, man, it was, you know, we were within 1%. 65% of San Diegans voted to expand it. There was one individual that decided to spend $300,000-$400,000 of his personal money to oppose it, and you know, when it's that close, you can say that person made a difference in the outcome. There is still a glimmer of hope there, because there is some unsettled law in California as to whether or not, when it's a citizens initiative, which is what this was, it requires 50% or more or 65% or more, and the city has kept that option open the whole time. I'm always the eternal optimist, so I haven't quite given up on this measure yet, just because the California Supreme Court may have something different to say about it. If that's not the case, though, you're probably talking a few years, because you're going to have to revamp, and the city's budget right now is a disaster, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But one question I've got on that, though, is where would you extend it anyway? Because I remember when I first started going, there was always conversations about where would we go, and then where they were looking to go became the Hilton.
So there's two directions you can still go. I know the Hilton's there, but the current approved plan is towards the water. So essentially, you would get rid of the park.
Yeah,
you get rid of the park and the parking lot behind the building. You'd move the access road back there, basically right against the promenade, and then the building would go. I'm sorry.
Hall J becomes a boat.
Yeah, it's actually so you keep all the same halls, but D through H all become bigger. A through C stay the same. D through H go out further. The coolest thing about the existing plan was they were putting a 5-acre park on top of the building.
Wow.
And you could program there. You could, I mean, it was going to be this incredible, part of the building where you could see downtown and the water. I mean, it was this. It's a beautiful design. The other
mother of all ramps as well.
Oh yeah,
it went from the Hilton all the way up to the back.
Yeah, it was basically the ramp was from Hall H to Hall D at a slight ascent. So it was this crazy, awesome ramp to get up to the roof. The other place you can actually go that I took a look at when we were still trying to figure out if the existing plan was going to work, is you can actually push out from the front. So you can push Harbor Drive up against the rail tracks because there's some grass there.
There is Greenland,
yeah. And then you push Harbor Drive forward a little bit. You don't actually have to sink it. People used to think you'd have to drop Harbor Drive and build on top of it, but that would be like billions of dollars, so that doesn't work. But you can push forward, and then the cool thing about that is if you put a bridge, you can basically have the front door of the building in the gas lamp. You can drop a front door right by Tinfish, basically, and which would be really cool. And that would get you almost as much as going back would. So it's a little smaller of an expansion, but it's within 70,000 square feet. I mean, it's really close. So there's places to go.
Okay.
Frank, I always joke that phase 3 was to the back, phase 4 was to the front. So that's just me. But yeah, the thing about this building is it's on normal times it's full. It's so full we were scheduling stuff into the 2030s, into the 2040s, and people want to go there. So if you build it, you'll fill it. That's just the reality of it.
Okay, got a couple of these questions that have come in from our audience, and then we'll talk to Tony as well. Because
what everybody's been waiting for, frankly.
Well, we'll dive into one or two of these quick questions then. Andrew Dickinson, I believe this is going to be a spelling mistake, but is SDCC a private company owned by the council or part of the council itself?
It's a private company owned by the city.
There you go. And also a basic question about how you became selected to the board. This has come from Karen Session.
So it's a political appointment. So some of it is politics. I had served on the City of San Diego's Ethics Commission in the aughts, and so the Ethics Commission, the Convention Center, the Port. There's a handful of commissions that are sort of almost as much responsibility as an elected official has. They are generally appointed by either the mayor, the council, or a combination thereof. And you, what they like, obviously, for the bigger boards is to have somebody that's had experience on a board, because you run a bigger and bigger organization as it gets through. And so the fact that I think I'd previously served on a fairly significant board here in town, put me in a mix of people that would qualify, if you will, for one of the bigger ones. And then just kind of applying and talking to the various council members about my approach and how I would what I thought I would bring to the table. I had a reputation for bringing transparency to sort of politics and campaign finance when I was on the Ethics Commission, and so they wanted more transparency on the Convention Center finances and board. So that seemed to carry the day for at least my appointment.
Excellent stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Any more questions, do dive in on the chat, and we'll do and cover as many of them as we possibly can. But I think it's time to introduce properly Mr. Tony Lee to the conversation. Hello, Tony.
Keep chatting together about this. This is great. I've got what year would this have been for San Diego Comic Con?
This would have been which one?
Last year was 50. This would be 51.
Yeah, 51, right? 51.
So, are they going to be renaming it so that next year is 51?
Would be, yeah.
Yeah,
it would be.
That's fine. I want to check that because in June it's my 50th birthday, and I've decided that I'm probably just going to stay 49 for another year.
I think that makes sense.
I'm going to use San Diego as the basis for that, so that's good.
Well, considering I'm Arrested Development embodied, I'm 16 for the rest of my life, I think, which explains the inability to grow any kind of facial hair. So that kind of explains that. Tony, I mean, as a writer of comics and a writer of all kind of formats, you are definitely seeing this whole crisis that's hitting all sorts of industries from a very different perspective. And in the comics industry, it's a lot of people who are working freelancers, and they're definitely struggling to kind of balance any kind of professional work that they had in place with their own projects, which they're now kind of bringing to the fore. But what I'm definitely seeing is a lot of camaraderie and support of each other within the industry. And I appreciate that maybe from the view of an enthusiastic fan, But what's the mood that you're seeing with your fellow creators?
I'll agree with that. I mean, one of the reasons, I mean, I will say as well is another one of the reasons you wanted me on was because of the fact that I have a secondary job, which is I'm the guy who runs the comic zone of the London Film and Comic Con. Which over the last few years I've sort of curated, and I've brought in a lot more comic creators. And I will just say very quickly on that one, at the moment I can't give you any answers on what LFCC is doing because I'm not part of Showmasters, I'm just a consultant, but I do know that they have looked at this. I know that even if they did happen in July, it would be a much reduced footprint. They're not going to make a decision until probably next month on that. And I know that probably what will happen is a lot of the things that happen in July will move to the winter show in November, and November will probably become a bigger show. But the reason I'm saying that is because obviously I talk to a lot of creators who use comic conventions to build their money, because, you know, comics, if you're getting paid work, that's great, but a large percentage of comic creators and comic artists work from gig to gig. So they rely on comic conventions to, you know, do commissions or sketches or things like that. So, you know, I mean, I know creators who literally will go to conventions 40 weeks out of the year. You know, so every weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they're somewhere else. And this is gone for them suddenly, instantly, just disappears. And so I've had a lot of people contacting me saying, what's happening with London Film and Comic Con? I've had creators who were going to do San Diego, we're going to do London Film and Comic Con, but then when it was clashing with San Diego, said, we're sorry, we can't do it. I'm now emailing and saying, hey, you know, are you guys going? Because everybody's unsure what's going to happen. And I think with the comic community, the one thing I have learned is that the comic community comes together and looks after each other, and they back each other up. And last year at the London Film and Comic Con, I saw this never more so, because we had issues with a couple of guests, media guests, and the comic convention, the comic guests all kind of sided, you know, with each other, realizing that, well, that's not guest behavior, and kind of looked at that. But we also had things where, for example, a hotel room was booked for one of the guests. The flight's delayed. It was Will Sliney. The flight's delayed from Ireland. He got in late. But the hotel, because it had gone past 10:30, had given the hotel away. So while we were trying to sort things out, the comic creators who were guests were all working out who could stay with who and who could go where, just to make sure the Will had a room. And, you know, and I've worked in many places over the years. I've worked in many industries, and comics are one of the few where there'll be two people with no money whatsoever, but they'll still give each other what pennies they have. Sure. You know, when you're stuck in that hole, they will jump down in that hole with you just to make sure that you're not alone. Yeah. And a lot of the creators that I know have had problems and are having to try and find new ways to employ themselves. And it is tough. I mean, it's tough for all of us. I mean, I'm lucky in the respect that I work in other mediums as well as comics now. But, you know, there were literally, I mean, I had three comic things going into production this year. Two of them just basically just disappeared like that. It was like Thanos clicked his fingers and they were gone. And I'm not the only one. I've had people who have had their entire year just removed over the blink of an eye. Comic companies have just suddenly turned around and said, that's it, we're done. You know, no more of them. I'm lucky, and I'll be honest, because people like Lionforge Only, who I'm doing a book for, sat down and said, no, keep going. You know, we're going to keep making sure this happens. But yeah, it's never before have I seen so many big name established creators sitting there going, I'm absolutely screwed. Yeah. Because all the things, I mean, and again, we were in a weird situation before this all happened with, like, you know, Dan Didio leaving DC Comics, and no one knew what was going to be happening there, and Marvel, you know, and DC were kind of bouncing against each other. To lose that straight away, to have Diamond suddenly close down, to have a ton of publishers of all sizes just turn around and go, yeah, we're going to pause. Yeah. It's a scary place, and I'm not too sure how it is in America, but 70% of the artists and writers in the UK, you know, they're in this kind of weird industry where they're self-employed, but at the same time they don't make a great amount of money. And now the government's doing this big thing where they're going to say, we're going to give you 80% of your money and things like that. They're not. They're giving 80% of the money that you get after taxes and stuff like that.
Isn't it off the back of your last income tax return? Yeah.
sense. And here's the problem with that. And having recently bought a house in the last 4 years, I know this. You have a job where you earn £40,000 and, you pay your 25% tax, whatever it is, and then you get the remainder as your funding. And that's what you live on. The government will give you 80% of your 40,000. With creators and comic creators, people like that, you might make 40,000 in a year. You then pay your taxes on that, but you're given 11,000 as a base, which you don't have to pay on. You then have your expenses that come out. So I work from home, I claim for my rent and things like that. And there's other expenses that you have to do as a business, which if you worked for a company, they would pay for, but you have to pay yourself. And by the time you work out your taxes, and I pay the same amount of tax as most other people. There's no difference on that. But there are people who don't. So therefore that changes that. But then when you find out your actual take-home money after taxes and stuff like that, your 20%, 25% is taken off, your 11,000, you're now down to say 20,000 a year. Well, that's what you're going to get your 80% of.
Oh.
And there are writers out there who are literally on the breadline who have made maybe 5,000-6,000. Yeah. So they're going to get less than a month for their entire year. And this is where the problem kicks in, because these guys, they can't live on that. And that's not what they're going to have to do. So they're going to have to be unemployed. They're going to have to go for tax credits. But then the moment you go for unemployment, that affects your self-employment. And that is where the issue's coming in. This is where, I asked last week, there's a lot of American companies and a lot of American people now going, we're going to start doing some charities and things like that. I've yet to find a UK organization that's turned around and said, we're going to find a film fund, find a comic fund. I work in film and TV, and every day I'm seeing organizations, Netflix, Amazon, all these people saying, here's 500 million we're putting into a freelancers fund for writers who are having problems. We need something like that for comics.
Sure.
And unfortunately, a lot of the big companies are in America, and they're looking after the American companies. And I understand that completely. But we do need to find a way of looking after. Even if it's some way of turning around and saying, okay, look, these guys are doing commissions and they come to your convention and you want them and they're going to do a commission at your convention. Buy it off them here. Go here. Rachel Smith, who you had on last week, is, she's doing a great job. She's doing every day. She's doing a sketch, like a strip. And then she sells it on Etsy. She does prints, which is great and wonderful. But unless you know Rachel, you don't know she's doing it. And there needs to be bigger press exposure for these. We need to be calling on Rich Johnson and Bleeding Cool and, and a dozen other places and saying we need to have this. Yeah, exactly. That's one of the pieces. There needs to be more exposure to how people can help creators. And I don't think we're there yet, because at the same time, a lot of creators don't want to make a fuss. There's a lot of I've been really curious about the crowdfunding the kind of charity drive that's been happening this weekend and the last couple of weeks, which is the Creators for Comics. That's been more for the retailers. That's been for the bookshops and for the comics, which is great. I'm waiting for the first effort now for creators themselves, because like you say, I think we're going to see a massive swathe of them just no longer being able to make comics. But here's the problem, and believe me, I'm not in any way saying I'm taking a side on this, because I've seen both. When I do comic zone planning and things like that, Comic Zone has two sections. One is which is called guests, and one is which is called Artist Alley. Now, the problem with that is, the reason they do that is because if you're a guest, you've been invited, you've got credits in the industry, and people will come and see you, and you get a little table and stuff like that. But in Artist Alley, they're still comic creators. They're still people who are making their comics, but some of them don't have credits. Some of them have never been professionally paid to do it. So therefore, there's a kind of line that covers. Once you start looking at a comic charity that's paying towards comic creators, where does the line go? Do you give it to someone who's literally lost out the 3 comics that they do a month and now has no money? Or do you give it the same to somebody who maybe does 3 creator-owned things and does them in the side? Or what about the guy who pays his artist to do the stuff for him? Or the girls who put together as a group and do things? There's so many different ways to write a comic. All of them are being hit in different ways with creating. And I think there needs to be some way of doing it, even if there's a way of monetizing things online where, going back to the old sort of webcomic Patreon kind of way, where you can actually turn around and say, I'm putting my things online and you can, pay a certain amount of money to get it. Or just giving that nodding. Donny Cates is doing amazing stuff in America, buying, pulling pull boxes. But there's people in the UK who are doing the same. Who I'm not going to name their names. And there are people who are deliberately going out and buying every indie comic they can find just to make sure those guys are making money. But at the same time, those guys aren't making the money from that indie comic, because that money is then going to go to the publisher, who will then give it to them in their royalty statement, which might not be for a year. You know, I mean, I do a lot of creator owned stuff for Marcosia, and I'll get, well, pretty much every May, I'll get my royalty statement. So you buy something now, great, I'll get it in May. But if you buy it, you know, in 2 months' time, I'll get it next year. And that's the biggest problem we have, is most people who do creator owned stuff, they live for selling it to somebody face to face at a convention. Sorry, there's a bit of an off on one. I do apologize.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm really curious as well to see, like you say, we're looking at the different models and how the existing models have almost collapsed in a matter of weeks. I mean, Diamond is the big example of that. To go from the monopoly of distribution for comics, certainly in North America and across the globe, to then closing their warehouses and almost coming to a complete standstill within I think it was like a 2-week period. It was just absolutely insane. But then I'm just curious, number one, whether should Diamond die, and or at least that monopoly should die, and whether we will see more creators taking on their own avenues of reaching out to their audiences in terms of crowdfunding, in terms of self-publishing, in terms of getting stuff posted online. I think we're going to see a massive ramp up of that.
Oh, well, straight away, I'll say, I mean, I look, there's a lot of people at Diamond I know and I respect and I love, but Diamond itself, I've had issues with for a long time. Marcosia hasn't used Diamond for years because Diamond charge a ton of money to actually have that book come through. You know, there's a chunk of your percentages. I mean, Diamond, when Marcosia were going through this, I mean, they were charging normal rates for their books, but by the time they'd done their printing costs and by the time they'd done Diamond, they were literally losing $1 a book. You know, so they actually went on their own and went through Amazon and made more money that way. There used to be other alternatives to Diamond who kind of died down. I don't think this will kill Diamond because Diamond is a beast. But I think you're going to see, there's two things I'd like to see, to be perfectly honest. One is that DC and Marvel are talking about trying to get back into the mom and pop stores in America. They're trying to get back into the shelving. And when I was a kid, you know, you'd go in your corner shop and you'd find the comics. And I'm aware that this kills comic stores, and I don't want to kill comic stores. But then at the same time, I've got 5 comic stores I go to, and pretty much every single one of them barely has comics anymore. It's Funkos. At London Film and Comic Con, a friend of mine runs a comic store in Stevenage, and most of his comics are online now. His entire store is pretty much toys and comics and Funkos. So there's an element where if the comic stores are reducing the comics, then we need to be looking at something else anyway. And if mom and pop stores are going to take Image and Boom and other things like that, well, that's going to give us an attitude, an avenue to go through, and it will change the attitude of Diamond. The second is if somebody turns around and says, I will create an alternative to Diamond. And we've had them in the past, big dreams, and then they've died. But all it takes is one to turn around and say, we can do this. And at the moment, you know, Diamond is that old tiger that's being, you know, bitten by the younger ones, and it's licking its wounds. There's a moment where people are going to walk in and take stuff. I mean, already Midtown are doing stuff in America with DC. It's going to change, and this is going to completely change it. And I think somebody put a thing up at the bottom I saw just then about it. It's annoying it took a pandemic to do this. And yes, it's disgusting it took a pandemic to do this. But then nobody wants to talk about this if you're creative, because the last thing you want to do is piss off Diamond or DC or Marvel because you're worried that you might never work for Diamond or DC or Marvel.
Sure.
And that's where it starts coming through.
I mean, we've got a comment from Solicitor's Meg. Always good with really strong questions when he joins in. What are your thoughts on DC's distribution decision? Because they've decided to start looking at not only using Diamond, but also going through their own distribution method. I believe they're wanting to start getting into basically opening up their own warehouses and start publishing themselves. I mean, I feel like I said, I think the monopoly is going to come to a close. Is DC the first, and will they be the last?
No, I think DC will do this. What my thoughts on it are, it's very similar to the fact that DC needs to sell the comics. They can't not do the comics. You know, they can't not have these on the door. They can't put them online and just go digital, because then the comic stores get suffered. You literally have to have a situation where they have to find a way of doing this. And if Diamond won't step up, then they have to step up themselves. My worry is they're turning around and doing short-term deals with these people and saying, look, we only need this for 6 months, then we'll see how it goes. And then they'll do it for 6 months and loads of people join in. And then all it takes is for DC to go, do you know what? I've changed my mind. And then boom, everything collapses again. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I would, don't get me wrong. I've got all respect for Diamond. Most of my comics go through Diamond. I'm not going to complain, but I'd like to see somebody turn around and try and say we can do the same, because there were a lot of people in what's called the green pages, which is when you look in previews, you have, your big main front, and then everybody else is just dumped in the back alphabetically. There's a whole ton of those guys who would probably quite happily go with somebody else if it meant they got seen or they got viewed. Because, I mean, DC and Marvel in their heyday does, 70, 80 books a month, if that, and those aside, you're not going to be buying many other comics. So everybody else, those other 100, 200 odd companies are all struggling for your $10 of your money per month. They're going to look for whatever ways they can. And if somebody turns around and says, look, we're only going to do independent press, I think that would help. I think if somebody turns around and says, we're only going to do American press, that will still help in that respect. Sure.
Okay. Like I say, we wanted to get a couple more questions. I think we'll carry on the conversation for a little while longer, because when I started this new run of the shows, I was going to try and keep it to an hour, but we've got a lot to get into this episode, so we fully understand we're going to go on a little bit further with Tony.
I'm learning a lot, so it's all good.
Tony, as somebody who's
burning my career down in very big bridges at the moment.
Not at all. I don't know. Listen, you are saying things which a lot of people are saying. It's not just your inside voice on this one. Don't worry about it.
And from this outsider's perspective, you were very diplomatic.
Well, I mean, people have been saying that you have been very good with your answers as well for all of the information you've been giving us, Gil. Thank you very much for that. Tony, as somebody who has their fingers not only in the pies of comics in the UK, but also internationally, and you're also a lecturer at various events and schools across the globe and in the UK as well. What can you see as being the future of conventions, and also the way that creators will approach those shows? Because I'd like to approach this show from the perspective of the person who's attending. But at the end of the day, there is the talent that is going to be dissuaded to attend shows, especially on an international level. Certainly from I can imagine the conversations you've been having about the London show. I mean, what's been the conversation when it comes to the international guests?
Well, I mean, to be honest, as I said, I've not had any conversations about the show because Showmasters has pretty much had to close down. The office crew are now all at home. And again, nobody knows. I will be honest, I'm kind of hoping, and this is a personal thing, this isn't anything from anybody I work with. I mean, I used to do, MCM Comic Con, and I felt the same then. I do feel that over the years, the media guests the prices have gone up and up and up and up and up. And there was a point where people were, not so much wanting to go to conventions because of the amount of money, or when they turned up, they'd have £300-400, but that's like 3 guests and then they're done. And one thing I have seen is that, there's a lot of my guests at LFCC will turn around and say, we've had one of the best conventions we've ever had. I had people at LFCC Spring say, we've had one of the best conventions we've ever had. But I learned a lot of the times what I've suggested to them is look at who's turning up as guests and make sure your work is related to those guests. Because half the people who walk around on the comic, at the London Film and Comic Convention, lots of people who walk along the comic section don't even know comics. They're there because they want to get a photo with Christopher Lambert, like myself. I'm not going to complain, or they're there because of, some other guest, or the Game of Thrones cast are there, or, something like that. They've turned up for those people. And then they'll be walking along and go, oh my God. I mean, Will Simpson was there a couple of years ago, and it was like, he's the Game of Thrones storyboarder and designer. People didn't care that he'd done Hellblazer. It was only when they sat down and looked that he'd done Hellblazer that they were like, oh my God. So there's a case of pulling people in is great. But again, what they're having to do is they're having to tailor what they're showing or what they're announcing to whatever's in the area. Now, what I'd like to see is with international guests and stuff like that is, I mean, I'm a writer, and conventions are always a tough thing for a writer, because you can go as an artist and you can do a sketch. You know, you can give me a blank page and go, can you draw me something? I sketch it and I go, that's £100 or £50 or your house. It doesn't matter what it is. You know, I will do this for you. As a writer, all I can do is sign your comic. You know, I'm not going to try and go, let me write you a dialogue piece, or, you know, let me do a comic. You know, there's
well aware that's what the first thing I'm going to ask you to do the next time I see you.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean,
when you come to San Diego and we have a beer, Tony, we're definitely talking about the dialogue you're writing for me.
But this is the thing. I mean, obviously, most of the times when I was at San Diego, it was when there was a book, and I'd come along and I'd sign copies of the book. I remember Alex Sinclair did an amazing thing where he would sit beside Jim Lee, who is obviously live streaming as we're live streaming, which is nice of him.
Our numbers did tank, by the way, just to let you know.
And then he'd pass over to Alex, who would then use crayons and or brushes or pastels and color it. And that was a way of two people doing the same thing, which was great. So, I mean, as a writer, it's very difficult. Unless you've got stuff to sell, writers don't make money at conventions. You know, they'll turn up and do the signings, but most of it is just for them to turn up and say hello and give something back to the fans. Artists are the ones who have the biggest issue. And the international artists, again, the biggest thing is they can't bring stock because they're turning up with hand luggage, or they're turning up with a very small amount. So they rely on people turning around and saying, you know, I'm going to put my list out a week before the con, and then they'll just turn up, buy some A3 sheets and just draw them while they're there. So I think what's happening at the moment with international guests is they don't know if they're going to go international as well. I mean, a ton of guests are now saying, when I say guests, people I know who are guests at conventions, not necessarily at LFCC, are saying, I don't want to get on a plane for another year because the air in that plane is circulated. I can't risk it. So now you've got an American guest who are going, I don't know if I want to go to UK. UK guests are going, I don't know if I want to go to America. And that's going to break it down. And I think what you're going to find is American conventions will be local American creative teams. You know, so if you're in San Diego, it'll be a lot of West Coast. You know, if you're in New York, it'll be a lot of East Coast. If you're in the UK, well, you know, we're tiny. So, you know, you can drive everywhere in a few hours. But it will be, you know, you won't get that many international people. You won't get the Italians or the Romanians or things like that. And I think that will become very interesting because I think a lot of because in the UK, we have small conventions every week. And I think that will become, the small conventions will become where people go because there's less people, there's less need to social distance, and you're still going to get what you need out of those things. And I think that's possibly where we're going to start going. And the smaller conventions will do better than the bigger conventions.
Fair enough. It makes total sense what you're saying.
I forgot what your question was, so I'm hoping that was
no.
right.
I mean, it kind of got there. That was the back end. That was exactly where I was asking. So that's great. And again, the comment from Solicitorus Meg, I feel human nature is going to limit how many people stay away. Most fans will go if they can. If they don't, there will be others, at least big cons happy to take their tickets. And Danbury is pointing out the small conventions like San Diego Comic Fest, but then again, he's a big fan of that particular show, so I can understand. But no, I think it is those shows which I think will thrive over the course of the future. I want to kind of say thank you to you guys for joining us today and kind of wrap things up in a positive nature by just thinking to a positive of what we can see in the future. I personally was hoping beyond hope that San Diego Comic-Con was going to be able to find some way of running this year, possibly at the back end of the year. But obviously that's not the case. So we are now looking at 2021. Gil, I mean, you were saying earlier that you can see that our need as fans to come together is going to overcome the situation we're in.
I think so, and I actually Tony's comment about smaller conventions got me thinking in terms of how you could sort of break up a big convention into small chunks. And again, you wouldn't have the numbers that you have, and you can maybe do some overflow type of stuff with video and distance stuff. But I think somebody said it on here that human nature. You know, we're going to want to get together. We're going to want to come. We're going to want to be the fans. Are going to want to come out at some point, you know, and after a year of this, good gravy, we're going to really want to be like seeing each other. a lot. So so I suspect that we're going to come back to it. It's just a matter of how we ease back into it, frankly, and the small adjustments that we'll make. But the small convention ideas was an interesting thing to sort of like start thinking in terms of just how you logistically take a giant convention and chop it up, because that might be the way you have to do it, at least for the foreseeable.
And one thing I want to say as to keep a happy ending on my side. Well, one thing I have noticed, and again, as I said, one of the great things is seeing the comic community looking out for each other, and no matter what size, and that is something that is important for me, because I mean, as I think I put online this week. I mean, this week was my 17th anniversary of effectively getting into comics. It was my meetings at DC and Marvel was in April 2003, and you know, and in those years, there have been times where, you know, you've seen a lot of dog eat dog and everyone against each other. And there's been, you know, pettiness and things like that. As in everything, you always have that. And this epidemic has basically has made people just go, do you know what, it's too big for this shit to happen. Yeah, we've got to look at this. You're seeing a lot more people spending time. A lot more creators are now reposting other creators and getting people seen. People who have got work are making sure that other people who don't have work are being looked at. But on a creative point, I had like 3 projects that I was doing that all got canned the moment this all went wrong. But in the last sort of 3-4 weeks, there have been projects that have been kind of on the burn or things being discussed, where I've had artists turn around saying, well, I'm actually bored. Do you want to play around and do something? And I've gone, yeah, sure. And we've worked out ideas. And I can guarantee you that's happening everywhere. So, you know, in a year's time, you're going to get what I call pandemic babies of your creative nature. You're going to get, you know, the next big saga, the next big Wicked and Divine, you know, all these big things that, you know, people know. You're going to get the new lot because these guys are sitting at home bored and they don't want much more Tiger King. They want to do something else, and they're going to sit down and hammer through new stuff. And once it's all coming back to normal, the smaller press seems so, like, you know, your Lion Forges, your Valiants, and stuff
Aftershock,
like that, are suddenly, you know, Aftershocks like Vault are suddenly going to go, right, we now need to have product. And they're going to have people walking in and going, not only have we got a pitch document for you, here are the first 3 episodes. Yeah. And it's going to be a fast turnaround. And we're just going to get so much incredible stuff coming out in the next few years because of this. That's the one good thing I take from this, is the creative stuff that's going to hit. Can you see yourself going crowdfunding? No. I've always been against crowdfunding on a personal level, mainly because I've had so many people I know who have done crowdfunding and it's fallen apart a bit and it's sort of landed bad on their shoulders. If a publisher I'm working for wants to crowdfund something, that's fine by me, you know, but there's just an element of it's a tough one. I've just seen too many people get bitten by it. I'm not saying it's a bad thing or, you know, you're just begging or something like that. It's just a case of I've seen so many people who've gone, I need, you know, $5,000 to make a book, and they've made 6. And then by the time all the bills have come out and all the payments have not happened, suddenly they're only on $3,000. But everybody who's booked has gone, well, we've paid you your money, and you've said, you know, where's our book? Where is it? And I've seen people actually quit the business because of crowdfunding. So I don't, if you're crowdfunding, go for it. And I try my best to fund as many as I can and advertise them, but I wouldn't. That said, I've got an incredible project and I want to see it done, and nobody wants to take it. I am going to bloody crowdfund it. And it's not for me, it's for whoever it is. Like Julian Nemeth, who's an incredible artist. He's just done Criminal Macabre with Steve Niles. I've known him for a few years. I met him in Budapest when I was doing a lecture. And we've got like 3 or 4 things we've gone, wouldn't that be great if this happened? Or wouldn't that be great if this happened? And there's going to be an element at one point where we're going to go, look, no one's going to print this shit. We're going to have to do it ourselves. So yeah, at that point, I'll ignore what I said here and do something completely different. Fair enough. That's fine. We'll look forward to the Indiegogo page going up in the foreseeable months. It's great to have you guys on. Thank you so much indeed for coming on and talking to us. Gil, I know you're former chair, but you are still active on Twitter. You do keep up to date and certainly sharing with what's happening in San Diego and the California area. Where can people follow you online and what you up to? It's at GIL Cabrera, just like it says there, except no space, on Twitter, and that's where you get as much of the sort of information that I'm getting and anything else that I feel like posting, and sometimes posting too much. So I take a Twitter break every few days and then fail miserably at it. Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much indeed for sharing that small protest outside of the building last night in San Diego, because anger is an energy from me at the moment, and that provided me with a good couple of hours of that got the blood up. Oh, fun and games, fun and games. Tony, where can people find you online?
I can be well. I mean, basically, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all as Mr. Tony Lee, MrTonyLee, where people can find me. I am going to quickly use this as a shameless plug as well, because
Go for it.
Anybody who does go on any of these will see that for today and tomorrow, because tomorrow's the anniversary of Bram Stoker's passing. For the last couple of days and the next couple of days, I'm actually giving away a free PDF of Harker, which is my Dracula sequel. Anyone can have it. There's no strings attached. It's purely, I want people to be able to have something they can do while they're bored and in lockdown. If you've read Dracula, this is a great little sequel to it. If you go onto my Twitter or my Facebook, you can find it, and it's easily downloadable. On Tuesday, I've got a short film that's hitting YouTube, which again was in festivals, and we've just said stick it out online. And every Friday on Facebook Live, I read adapted stories of my graphic novels, my children's ones, my Bandit books.
Oh, wow.
I write them into prose stories, and I read them out so that kids at school can, not at school, being homeschooled, can sort of look at them and read them and talk to them and stuff like that. So there are 3 things that you should totally go and do. If you follow me, or, just even if you don't follow me, still do them anyway, because, Len says you should.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I think it's interesting, if you are going to choose between Tom Hardy reading children's stories on Jackanory or Tony Lee on Facebook Live, I'd go for Tony Lee all the time. There you go.
Can do both. You can do. That's the joy of being stuck in 24/7.
We have
very,
time.
very true.
We have time.
You can totally do it.
Excellent stuff, guys. Thank you very much indeed for coming on, and enjoy the rest of your day, sir.
Thanks. Bye.
Excellent stuff. Thank you. And there you go. That's Tony and Gil. We do have Carol, who's joined in on Periscope. Shout out to Gil's Bob Burgers t-shirt at Toddland. Enjoyed this and all the info. So thank you very much indeed. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you very much indeed to Gil and Tony for coming on. Just very quickly, I'm going to let you know about something that's happening on Wednesday. Tony did mention about Rachel Smith, of which, like I say, I've been out and bought one. I got one of the quarantine comics that she's currently running on all of the social medias. As it happens, we've been speaking to Rachel. She was on the show a couple of episodes ago, and she turned around and said that she'd be more than happy for us to give away 2 prints, which we are going to do on Wednesday's show. So this Wednesday, we are going to be providing you with the opportunity to get yourself one of these. Let me just see if I can just bring this up on screen. Should be able to. There we go. She is allowing us to give away 2 of these prints. Basically, you have to watch on Wednesday. It's a live giveaway. So do join us, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT. Follow Rachel Smith on Twitter as well, twitter.com/Rachel_. That's Rachel, RACHAEL. And do follow her along. She is a fantastic artist. The work that she's done with Quarantine Comics has just been fantastic. And these 2 prints, which are the full-size color prints that she's doing 1 a week. She's providing 2 of them, and we're going to be giving those away on Wednesday. Looking forward to it. Right. What we do as well on our shows, each and every episode, is we do 2 features. Our crowdfunding spotlight, where we showcase a fantastic crowdfunding effort. And I want to kind of show your attention to this, which has caught my attention. This is The Catch, which is being put together by Steve Bryant and Ishmael Canals. It's currently available on Kickstarter, Kickstarter.com. The URL is up there on the screen at the moment. It's a Kickstarter which has only got a couple of days left, as far as I'm aware. Let me just see if I can just bring up the full details. I'm going to bring you some of the here we are, the preview artwork that they've got it, but it is the final week. They're looking for a goal of £6,000. They're currently up to 5,763, so really not far to go, but it's 70 hours left on this particular campaign. The book itself looks absolutely fantastic. It's a 3-issue comic book miniseries written and lettered by Steve Bryant, with art by Ishmael Canals, colors by Miriam Gibao, and edited by Chris Murren. And it is the first of many miniseries they've got planned for this particular universe. They have done a number of previous campaigns in the past, done really well on Kickstarter, and they're going to do so much stuff with this, especially considering the various stretch goals that they've got lined up. It's absolutely incredible with the amount of work that they're putting in. I mean, considering that there's a 250 deluxe collector's box, which you have to scroll 2 pages worth to get all the way down with what you actually get hold of. It's absolutely phenomenal what you can actually get for your bang for your buck on this one. But you can just start with an investment of $2, and it is just an incredible looking project, to be honest. The artwork is absolutely stunning. And let me just bring this up to a full screen so we can all just all dive in. It looks incredible. It's also been done in a multi language as well, because of the artist is Spanish, wants to bring out a Spanish version, so they're bringing out in both English and Spanish, and it's just absolutely gorgeous to look at. I've been following this for a while, and it's been great to see that this particular project is going to go as well as it's going to do. Like I say, it's 70 hours left to go, so it's more than likely going to beat its target, but I would heartily recommend checking it out. That is The Catch by Steve Bryant. That's kickstarter.com/projects. That number there, 389994459/thecatch12. Do check that out. And if you can, throw any money to any creators, like we've talked about on this particular episode. It is a case of the retailers doing all they can to get the books out to the fans out there, but at the end of the day, the creators are the ones that tell the story, and we have to support them as much as we possibly can. Now, the artist that I've chosen for our cup of tea artist of the day, admittedly, is not somebody new. We have, if you are a comics fan, you are aware of this person's work. I mean, I know that we did Jim Lee a couple of episodes ago. Same kind of drill. This is not exactly a newcomer, but this is somebody whose artwork is absolutely filling my social media feeds, and I've been thrilled to see them every time they've rolled around. John McCrae, of course, great British artist, and has been very much a case of putting some amazing work throughout his career. 2000 AD, for Marvel, for DC, currently putting out a great book called Dead Eyes, which is being published by Image Comics. Do check out the Twitter feed, like it, and see what he's coming up with. He's doing a lot of work in progress and putting a lot of sketches stuff up, stuff that he's done at conventions, commissions that he's been putting together. So just a real strong set of his artwork, and the variety of the artwork that he's been putting up as well. Just absolutely gorgeous. It's just been, it's just absolutely amazing to see these fantastic pieces of work. And like I say, he's putting these up on his Twitter feed, and this is what this section is all about. Those people that are making your social media feed so much better and just absolutely looking as best as it possibly can. This is John McCrae, and you can follow him at twitter.com/McCraeman. That's McCreaman, and he is our cup of tea artist of the day. Absolutely stunning. Excellent stuff. So there you go, full show. Very quickly then, I think what we can do is just very quickly cover the news, of course, that got announced this week. This was, of course, San Diego Comic-Con announcing that they would not be hosting the show for this year and postponing it for July 22nd to 25th, 2021, for the first time in its history. In fact, let me just pull up the page so at least then you can see it. It's heartbreaking, obviously, but it's responsible, and for me, it is the best decision that they've made, because at this point it is such a precarious situation. I ran a couple of tweets, which I'm going to bring up as well, which were the different perspectives that people had on what the actual show what the people are going to do in terms of their refunding of tickets and whatever. So I'm going to see if I can just bring that up as well. But very quickly, let's cover the actual statement. The comment from Comic-Con is the current situation requires exceptional measures. For the first time in its 50-year history, San Diego Comic-Con, the organizers behind the annual pop culture celebration, announced today with deep regret there'll be no Comic-Con 2020. Now, let's just go through a couple of the big the headlines of those of that particular announcement. Let's just bring this up here. Okay, the obvious big news is the announcement of individuals who purchase badges for Comic-Con 2020 will have the option to request a refund or transfer the badges to Comic-Con 2021. All 2020 badge holders will receive an email within the next week with instructions on how to request a refund. Exhibitors for 2020 will also have the option to request a refund or transfer their payments to 2021 and also receive an email within the next week with instructions on how to process their request. Now, I'm going to see, let me see if I can just bring this up because I want to try and talk about the results of the polls that I put up. I mean, it basically said a couple of things which I kind of expected from everyone, which is the response of, here we go, let's bring these up here. We're getting there, I'm finding them. Right, okay, let's bring up the Twitter feed as well. Right, so these were the tweets that I put out, basically asking if anyone wanted to refund their badges. The badge holders have the option to write for either a refund or a transfer. 90.4%, so basically 9 out of 10 people saying they're going to be transferring. Then you had the question, should Comic-Con hold a virtual online San Diego Comic-Con this July, ideally at the Comic-Con Museum? This was interesting, 72%. I expected it more in line with the kind of the 90s. I thought it was going to be an overwhelming vote, but 2 out of 3 people saying that it should, and then a third saying that it shouldn't be an online element this year, which I thought was very interesting. And then there was this, which kind of like relates to what we were talking about with today's conversation. How does the current crisis and regional efforts to contain it make you feel about attending San Diego Comic-Con next July? 30% saying weary, 4.8% saying completely dissuaded, 65.1% saying wholly positive, which kind of gives you that real sense of where people are wanting the atmosphere to go in the aftermath of this whole pandemic. But at the end of the day, like we have said for numerous weeks, and what I think we're going to be saying for numerous weeks more, all of these numbers may change if things don't improve, if we don't see any kind of end to the pandemic, and if we don't have our rulers and overlords make some drastic changes to allow us to be all safe and healthy. Interesting poll results, though, especially when it comes to the live virtual. We are seeing a whole bunch of virtual options that people have been putting out, but I think for myself, I have been put off by the whole bedroom and kind of kitchen sink aspect of it all. I wanted to see something, or I would like to see, if San Diego Comic-Con was going to do something virtual, if they were going to do something online, that we would actually have something of a more professional nature. So there we go. Into the Blue Mister, go and look at the picture that San Diego Comic Fest just posted on Facebook. You cannot put something like that and not have me go and look. So bear with me a second. Let me see if I can dig this up and see what they've said. San Diego Comic Fest. What have they posted? Hope this is worth it now that you've kind of got me to go to Facebook. And it's taking its time to load. Okay, we'll see if that gets there. Michael P. quite rightly says there's no mention of press, but then again, this was only a brief. It's 7 paragraphs, if that, when it comes to what the San Diego Comic-Con put out there. No comment about press, and indeed we've got Karma Savage. No comment about what pros are all about. I'm guessing it'll automatically transfer to 2021. But how about pro application renewals? I am due this year. Solicitor Smeg, do you think there will be online sales of exclusives like with WonderCon? Someone also mentioned about the actual the official t-shirts and hats and swag and stuff. Apparently, all of this will have been made already. I think that's a little bit optimistic. I don't know if that would have actually been produced yet. But we haven't had any official artwork. We've no idea what the actual the way it would have done. But I can imagine there will be some kind of online sales, some kind of content that San Diego Comic-Con will put together. But whether it will be worthwhile is something else. Let me just, I want to find this post that I've been teased about. Okay. Thank you very much, indeed, for sharing that. It is a slightly odd picture of our esteemed guest of honor, Bill Sienkiewicz. I'm not going to share that on the screen. As simple as that. Thank you very much indeed, Into the Blue Mister, for sharing that with us. Go to San Diego Comic Fest on Facebook. If you want to see a side of Bill Sienkiewicz, which I don't think you ever imagined that you would have ever seen. So there we go. We're 90 minutes in. I mean, let's just think. I did mention about this. Basically, I said that our numbers tanked. It was a joke. It was a joke that yeah, I was putting up, but it was more a case of at the half point to 6:30. We did have a slight drop in numbers purely because people were checking this out. Of course, Jim Lee has been leading the charge with Creators for Comics, doing some incredible sketches, which he's doing 60 of over the course of this month and next month, etc., etc. And basically is just at the moment on his Twitter feed, Twitch channel, sorry, started, like I say, an hour ago. He is doing a full-blown sketch live on Twitch. He's answering questions, which he's always incredibly good to do. If you've ever been to his spotlight panels at San Diego Comic-Con, yeah, well worth checking out. So stop watching this. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. But now head over to Jim Lee on Twitch to see the completion of this sketch. It looks absolutely incredible. I'm wondering if he's going to do a Superman, considering it was Superman's birthday yesterday. But there we go. Is he drawing around a can? Okay, I'm curious to see what he's doing with that now. So I'm going to go and check this out. That's Jim Lee on Twitch at the moment. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you very much indeed to Gil, and of course to Tony Lee for joining us. I'm going to bring this up because I do want to share with you that we are going to be having some more fantastic guests coming on the Hangout this month. So we had Gil. See what I'm doing here. We had Gil and we had Tony, but this Wednesday we're going to have a spotlight interview with Paul Jenkins, superstar artist. So do join in with that. Interesting conversation, I suspect, next Sunday with IDW's own Chris Ryle, talking about the comics industry, where the future of the comics industry could be at the other end of this particular pandemic. And then Wednesday, 29th of April, certainly talking, I can imagine, about crowdfunding and the perspective of the independent artist. Billy Tukey is going to be joining us. That's our guests. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. As always, please do support the Hangout at patreon.com/EnglishmanSDCC. Follow me on Twitter at EnglishmanSDCC. And in course, let's just see if we can see each other at conventions further down the line. I'd love to see you there. From myself, Len Sultana, and from my guests, take care. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.